Assalamu alaikum viewers, a very warm welcome to all of you watching Hidayat TV. My name is Haider. I'm here with another episode of Generation Gap. Viewers, following the end of Second World War, in 1948 British Nationality Act was passed to allow several millions of Commonwealth citizens to come and live in UK without any visa restrictions. In 1951, almost 3,000 people came to UK to fill the gap in the labour market. People from Pakistan, like any other Commonwealth countries, they came, and in 1951 the total number of Pakistani citizens who could trace their roots back to Pakistan was around 10,000. These numbers swelled, and then recent census in 2011, this number was around 1.1 million. In those 50 years, questions were asked and several hate speeches were made against the loyalty of these Pakistani immigrants towards the British society. Now, the question we ask today is regarding the social integration and social cohesion. We want to look around these issues. Are these issues relevant to us in modern society, especially after 2001? 9/11 happened. Media notions changed towards the Muslim and especially against Pakistani immigrants. Then came 7/7 in 2005. Similarly, incident happens all across the world, especially in Madrid. And in 2007, fiscal crisis started. There was a time which came in 2011 when in Munich, in a conference, security conference, Prime Minister David Cameron announced and pronounced that multiculturalism has failed. Soon joined the bandwagon with Angela Merkel of Germany, Australia former Prime Minister John Howard, and former Spanish Prime Minister Jose Maria Aznar. These people were saying that we have been too concerned about the identity of the person who was arriving and not enough about the identity of the country that was receiving them. Viewers, we have come across these statements, preconceived notions and concepts like identity, multiculturalism, integration and social cohesion. However, do we really understand these? Are these issues relevant and important to us? Do we understand them? What is our stance and what it should be? Today, inshallah, we will be looking at these issues associated to all this in detail from various angles. And we'll talk to people from different walks of life who think they got a better understanding, and we'll try to make ourselves better understand. In the first of the program, we will be generally discussing the issue related to social integration and national identity. What is it exactly? Identity, integration, social cohesion, and phenomenon of multiculturalism. In the second half, inshallah, we will be discussing, and we'll try to look at this issue from a cultural and religious perspective, and we'll try to find out, does our own set of beliefs facilitate these concepts among ourselves? Before I introduce our guest today, I want to add, as usual, one more thing here, that those of you who want to express their opinions, participate in our discussions, you can follow us on Twitter at GenerationGap14, use the hashtag GenerationGap14 and give us your opinion. Also, if you want to be part of the program, you can send your profiles to us at feedback at hidayattv.tv. So to discuss today's topic, we are joined by Imran Awan. He's a senior lecturer in criminology at Birmingham City University. Welcome, Imran. And he has previously held academic posts at the Center of Policy Sciences, University of Glamorgan, Wolverhampton Universities. He has co-edited two books, Policing Cyber Hate and Cyber Threats and Cyber Terrorism, and Extremism, Policing and Counterterrorism. I've also been invited to Prevent's seminar, which is a counterterrorism policy of UK government, to discuss government policy on how best we can prevent extremism. Sitting next to him is Dean Savage. He's a graduate from Kingston University in Film, Media and Cultural Studies. He's a freelance writer and working on a short film which will be released by the end of this year. Also, after the first break, we will be joined by a freelance journalist, Iram Ramzan from Manchester, and we will talk to her about this issue. So without any delays, Imran, tell us and simplify for us this notion of social integration and national identity. How do you define these terms?
Well, I think first of all, it's important to understand that we live in a diverse, multicultural society. And so when people talk about national identity, it's a very personal thing. It's a personal commodity in terms of how one wears programs that says, can you do this, can you not do this?
So it's more about that you have to subscribe to certain set of values to be British or to have the same national identity.
Absolutely, because I mean, if you went back 10, 15 years and if somebody said, I'm a British Asian, that comment probably would not have caused so much sparks as it would today. If somebody says, I'm a British Asian, then people question
the loyalty.
The loyalty, how patriotic are you, your Britishness. And I think that's unfortunate. Recent studies show, for example, that British Muslims feel very British,
as compared to the
exactly.
I think it's 90%.
90% Pakistani British Muslims felt they had a strong sense of belonging to this country. So I think it's unfortunate that we have this debate sometimes misconstrued by the media.
Okay, and I mean, bringing you in, Dean, what is your understanding, being, I would say, more sort of ethnocentric British, that how would you react to these sort of definitions?
Well, I think the key thing that Imran said that I absolutely agree with is that it's an incredibly individual sort of thing, and notions of being any nationality really are like to the individual. They are as the individual sees it. So me personally, having family that came in from Ireland, my grandparents were from Northern Ireland at the time, and obviously they were coming into a society where it wasn't particularly hospitable to Irish immigrants at the time. But as generations go on, the
more acceptability comes as well within the community that you're living in.
Yeah, acceptability is funny because it suggests that it's sort of allowing someone to be part of an exclusive club or anything like that. Whereas I think there's just been room made for people in order to express their own cultural identities within the community set. As well, I think that the moral panics and the things I would say perpetrated by the media. This is your identity. It causes a reason to see other people as threatening those values.
And your take on that?
Well, I agree totally with Dean, and I think you raised the point initially about the speech by David Cameron at this in Munich about multiculturalism and this active muscular liberalism, I think is how we refer to it as. And I think that was quite a dangerous thing to say because it, in a sense, promulgated that ethnic minority communities are segregated. They live in this sort of ghettoized areas where they're not willing to come and integrate. And I think that caused a lot of damage because, in fact, as you mentioned rightly, it is not just ethnic minority communities when we talk about social cohesion or integration. It is going out and reaching hard to reach groups. And by that I mean not just ethnic minority groups, that could be
any far right groups as well.
Absolutely.
Who segregate or who opt for segregation.
But I think what Cameron did was he sparked this idea about extremism.
But I mean, tell me about that. Obviously, you've been in the policy making as well. That the government has been propagating an idea for a long time of multiculturalism, especially the Labour government and all those. And all of a sudden you decided that it is defunct, that we just don't own it anymore. We have to work towards another strategy or policy. And obviously then you get the reactions as you mentioned as well. So that why government or policy making institutions have been propagating those ideas or doctrines?
I think it's a difficult one because I mean initially it depends on what type of government is in. So at the moment we have a coalition government, and as Dean was saying, there's quite a lot of emphasis on this idea of integration. That word keeps propping up, but in actual fact what it does do sometimes, and this is unfortunate, is it alienates communities, and in particularly attaches stereotypes and stigmas, and that's something that the government really needs to think carefully about, because it's one thing having policy in place, but it's another thing about winning hearts and minds of people. And that's the whole narrative of the government when it comes to trying to tackle, for example, extremism. This whole idea is you win hearts and minds, but how do you do that?
I think Americans have been unable to do that as well. So, but doesn't not this all leads to sort of cohesion? I mean, not this cohesion is more sort of forceful integration, that you have to integrate to this community to have to form a Britishness and subscribe according to certain set of values. What do you say, Dean?
I'd say that the interests are coming from a place of it needs to be speedy in order for them to get to adhere to their interests and as politicians, which is to win votes and win hearts and minds, as Imran said. And that's not the most conscientious way to go about things, because again, as Imran said, you've got to go further to reach those harder to reach groups by using these broad terms and labelling, or by suggesting a certain set of values as key to a group, and it being very closed. What you do is you dismiss the individual, and you dismiss sort of separated struggles that may go on within those communities.
Okay, so, but how would you react? I mean, how would you say that this sort of policy of forceful integration, what is the best way out there in terms of policy making?
I think it's a difficult one, because obviously the government has a certain narrative and it tries to follow suit on that principle. But I think as British Muslims or ethnic minorities, whether they be Sikh community or the Hindu community, we should be proud of what we've done, what we've contributed to this country. And, people that work with, for example, ethnic minority communities will be the first to acknowledge that these people are integrated into society. Mm-hmm. So I think there has to be a balancing act played.
And I mean, in terms of, I was reading it somewhere as well, that 4% of the South Asian community, they contribute around 6% in the GDP, towards GDP. So, I mean, what sort of certificate we need to be... Okay. I mean, getting to that sort of media narrative now, which has been propagated by certain media, especially you, why there is so much this negativity around all this?
I think simply because, in the most simple way, in my opinion, and in a lot of academics' opinions, people like to feel that they're part of something. And the most obvious thing to look at is sport. There's a very tribal sort of idea of sport, an attitude towards sport where people go out and support their country or support their local club, and it's like a war without blood. Ultimately, it's
a media war. But
yes.
Why it's been waged against certain specific groups or communities?
Well, obviously. Again, most recently, alluding to 9/11, there seems to be a very, although it's not that, a very sort of easy narrative to take, which is this threat of extremism against the core good Western values and the flag and the stars and stripes and all of this stuff, which a lot of people don't really buy, and that's brought over to in the British media, obviously, with the 7 attacks. I don't like calling it that, but that's what they labelled it. And what they do is they create a sense of fear, which people buy, in order to create a sense of unity within the people that stand against these supposed threats. And the irresponsible thing that is done, obviously, is that it uses these things. The key things with these people are not that they were Muslim, because there's no practicing Muslim who follows the Quran who would say that what was done was right in the name of Islam, in general communities and things like that. It's an act of extremism, and it's used so widely and ladled on so thickly that people who don't think or read tabloid newspapers, which are the most widely read, it creates a very irresponsible sense that these are the values of the other, us and them, the whole concept of us and them, and therefore you create teams. And
I think there is another problem as well, Imran, that which I have seen practically as well, that as soon as you try to defend or try to raise your voice against something which has been clearly painted with one sort of brush, that we termed as apologetic, or we are complacent to whatever someone else is doing, so we can't even question those narratives in the media. So is that right, or do you agree with it?
I think it's unfortunate, because one of the key things whenever incidents like 7/7 or 9/11 happen, the initial reaction is trying to find out why this has happened. Why did these people decide to blow up a train or this bus in the case in the US? But the argument really has to be trying to understand not just why and the condemnation, but in essence, when people start to question this and say, how did these people do this? What was the process in which they actually followed? Then somehow you may be empathizing with them. And then if you're empathizing with them, then somehow you're you're...
So you can't investigate even practically yourself. I mean, you can't say that someone along the lines, for example, in British intelligence, they were aware of 7/7 and they were unable to do anything. But if we point fingers toward intelligence services, then obviously we are not loyal, or we start getting loyalty lessons.
Well, so you see, the issue really is, first of all, everybody condemns these attacks. These are really vile atrocities, and it's the killing of innocent people. But then there is that underlying cause, trying to find out what led these people to commit this act. And it is unfortunate because, like you say, in the media, when you start to raise those questions, then you may be seen to be somebody who's trying to empathize with these people by trying to ask the question why. But for people like myself as criminologists, that's the whole point, is to try and understand the reasons why people commit crimes and then to try and find solutions for local communities.
Okay. I mean, in terms of policy making, coming on that one as well, I mean, I was reading about this prevent strategy as well, that don't you think it's a bit late to start working on these sort of... I mean, they've been focusing on when people used to come here and whatever their needs are and those sort of things. Rather than having a very provocative approach, they were reacting to whatever they were asking for, or whatever these communities, when they were segregating. If, for the sake of argument, we say they were segregating Yorkshire or Lancashire or Slough or Luton and Midlands, especially in terms of Pakistanis. So they were reacting more to, rather than taking a proactive approach. If we, for the sake of argument, we say that they are implementing these strategies now. Do you agree with it, or what's your take on it?
Well, the government's counter-terrorism strategy is enshrined in its contest strategy, which has the strands, the four, protect, prepare, pursue, and prevent, which is what you mentioned. And the whole idea behind prevent is preventing people becoming extremists or becoming terrorists. And the argument really is, how far has prevent been successful in engaging with Muslim communities? It is considered to be the government's softer approach to community engagement. So prevent uses lots of other different types of courses and things that it tries to use to integrate communities. Okay. So for example, you have an initiative called the Black Country Imams Project in Dudley, which is trying to get imams or the preachers in Islam to come together and improve their English skills. And the whole idea is that if they, because they may be from a different subcontinent country, if they can speak English, then they will have much more of a contact with the youth in particular. But as you rightly say, prevent has always come with criticism, because many Muslim communities feel sometimes it's a form of spying upon them. And I've done a lot of research examining Muslim communities' perceptions of things like prevent and other government counterterrorism strategies. And that's one thing the Muslim communities that I've spoken to say to me, is that there is a...
I think it's more to do with that if we get a statement, or in terms of anything, and if we ask questions, but it's more mutually suspicion of each other, in terms of we don't trust the government when it comes to these sort of formation of strategies, whatever their interests are, and they're making an honest effort as well. So it's down to us as well that we have started doubting the policy-making institutions as well.
Yes, I think to a certain extent. I think this is something that we should all work on together. There should be a universal approach to trying to deal with these issues. But I think the key thing is building trust. And the way you build trust is you engage with communities in a way that they would like to be engaged with, i.e. you consult them. I'll give you another example, Project Champion, which some of you may be aware of in Birmingham, which was the installation of CCTV cameras in predominantly Muslim areas, paid for by a terrorism allied fund, with little consultation from the community.
And especially it was targeted to one specific area in Birmingham as well.
Yes, there was different areas that it focused on. and the reaction from the Muslim communities there was quite strong, and they were, you know, that issue of trust between them and law enforcement agencies like the police is pretty low, I would argue now, as a result.
Okay, Dean, tell us about, we're talking about policy making here. From your own experience, what do you think? Is it fair for, at the moment, is it fair the policy making institutions, the way they're tackling things? Or?
Well, obviously there has to be, there is fear, there has to be a great sensitivity when it comes to dealing with anything of this nature, because as Imran said, it's how do you do that how do you administer policies like this without feeling that you are victimising or, you know, spying on a community that has not in itself committed any crimes. So
yeah, as a community they haven't.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to sort of get into those waters without feeling that you're tarring a brush of generalisation on a whole group of people that don't deserve to be or have.
I mean, I was reading this. It was in. I mean, I can quote it from Guardian on Thursday. David Cameron says, "Justice for all, unless you are an immigrant." So this is something they're coming up in April now. That when your appeal rights will be restricted as immigrants, you won't be able to have any access to the legal aid and all those sort of things. So this is something which is again up in the media. So what do you make sense? How would you react to those sort of statements?
Well, I think it's difficult. I mean, we have to read lots of things in context as well. So trying to understand what the rationale behind certain statements are. So I think as a community anyway, an ethnic minority communities, not just the Muslim communities, there should be that emphasis that, you know, we're here to stay, we're happy to integrate, and we're happy to be part of British society. And I think that should be something that should be portrayed through the media as well as politicians.
But I mean, in terms of these different political parties, it's just not for them. It's a vote-taking slogans, you know, that no to immigration, and then we'll reduce it by 100,000 by 2015. Is it just those sort of slogans, or they're really serious about it?
I would say that it's pandering to. They're after votes. It's a votes business, and it's pandering a lot to the media narratives of immigration, and especially it's always the economy and sort of benefit systems and stuff like that are things that and stress on the NHS are things that are repeatedly brought up in media stories. And what that does is it creates a sense of injustice for the working man, or that he's paying into a system.
But going back to my introductory thing as well, that these immigrants were mainly brought in to fill the gap.
Of course, of course. And on a personal level, I do believe that it's being used as an excuse for people who don't try or would rather not get off the benefit system as an unfair system that is providing for the immigrant, quote unquote, and that is reducing opportunities for the British-born deserving individual. Yeah. So that's where the obviously it's not very helpful. But as far as the politicians are concerned, you know, immigration is a thing that a lot of people will vote on purely because they believe that it's diluting a sense of national identity due to, I dare say, a laziness with looking at the facts, looking at how much immigrants have contributed to building the country.
What's your take, Imran?
Yeah, I agree.
Is it just about the votes, or is it just something really going on?
I think you know, it probably is both. You know, it is probably about votes, but I think also somehow there is an argument that could be made that it's quite ideological, in the sense that, you know, it's trying to have this perception that their ethnic minority communities, or in this instance the Muslim community, does not want to integrate within society, and on that basis then how can we try and curb, if you like, the issue of immigration? Is it something that is possible that governments can do, But when you look at it and you look at the facts, I mean, we live in a society now, as I said at the beginning, which is diverse. You know, there's globalization, there are issues of poverty, unemployment, deprivation.
Mhm.
And I think the government really needs to look at some of those issues first before we start to try and tackle issues of state multiculturalism.
I mean, that leads to my next question. I mean, to my understanding, immigration is not the only issue which is social cohesion is associated with. There are other reasons as well, like poverty, social deprivation. People living in certain areas don't access to the jobs, and those sort of. So, what's your take on that one? Is poverty especially?
Absolutely, I think there are issues that have to be looked at: poverty, unemployment. Low levels of deprivation in particular communities. I think the government needs to focus on that. Trying to get jobs and trying to get people back into work must be a priority. So I think you're right, social cohesion doesn't just start with ethnic minority communities. It starts by looking at the wider socio-demographic and socio-economic factors.
As well, okay. Dean, tell us, is there any choice? For, I mean, you have to coexist within a community, or do you have any choice? Like, I'm sure when your grandfather, they immigrated from Ireland, they were living with at least some Irish, streets where the Irish people are living as well. So
yeah, there was an Irish community. I think. To be perfectly honest with you, there wasn't a lot of talk about what life was like then, because they tend to keep a lot to themselves. From what I could gather, there was the initial rejection, as there was, expected for the time. I mean, he immigrated in the 1930s, 1940s. So it would have been a case of there would have been groups of Irish people that stuck together. But key is the sort of economic element, which is that if you're doing a job for somebody, if you're contributing to the community, there may still be ignorant attitudes around, but it ultimately built up to a point where if you're a working man, then you can buy, which anyone can. So, but I don't think a community can be insular inside a society. I think that it has to operate as part of a wider framework.
And the Irish community, I mean, going back in the 1970s, were deemed at that time by many academics and critics as a suspect community.
Yeah, of course.
Because of the, obviously.
Yeah, because of the issue of counter-terrorism and all the other issues.
Yeah.
And many people now, critics argue that the Muslim community is a new suspect community because there are a lot of parallels with the Irish community.
Of course, yeah, and we had the whole issue in this city with the Birmingham Six, where 6 men were wrongly locked up for many years for a crime that they didn't commit, purely because they wanted to create a sense of ease within the community that they'd found the men responsible for the thing. And no one, while a lot of people didn't ask the amount of questions that you would expect would be asked when 6 men's lives.
And I mean, when you talk about policy making, especially, don't you think it should be more towards managing diversity rather than forcing people to integrate? I mean, you can celebrate cultures, you can have different things all together, rather than you have to subscribe, as I said earlier as well, that you have to subscribe to these sort of values.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fact that we have so many diverse communities is something to be proud of. You can celebrate the fact that there is a Sikh community, Jewish, Hindu community. All these faiths and the Muslim community bring a lot of cultural heritage to this country. So I think you're right in that sense that there should be that level of sort of celebration rather than just an enforcement of policy.
What's your take, Dean, before we go on break?
Oh, I'd absolutely agree with him, man. That it should be a celebration of culture, not...
Okay. Viewers, we will be joined by Aram Ramzan just after the break, and inshallah we'll see you after the break. Thank you. Welcome back, viewers. In the second part, we'll talk about social cohesion, integration and identity. However, in relation to our own set of values, culture and religious beliefs. We are joined by guest Iram Ramzan from Manchester. She's a freelance journalist, a social affairs reporter for Mancunian Matters, and she also writes for The Prior and digital journal, Asian Media, Revival Magazine, and The Backbencher. Assalamu alaikum, Iram. Assalamu alaikum, Iram. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, Tom.
How are you, Iram?
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay. My first question I want to ask you is, we are talking about social cohesion. Tell us how culture is important in terms of this debate.
Well, it depends. If you have people who've immigrated over from a certain part of the world, they are going to bring their culture with them. And in some cases, a lot of them don't abandon certain cultural practices, which doesn't lead to greater social cohesion. And what you find is that a lot of those immigrants, specifically maybe Pakistani ones or from certain parts of Pakistan, they will live in areas where they will live with other people of the same background. So they might be of the same village or same city. And so they live in a very insular-looking environment where they really interact with people from other cultures.
But I mean, is it a problem? I mean, if they prefer living with the families and the people they know already, so is it a problem?
On the one hand, no. You know, when you move to a different country, yes, you want to live with your family, you want to live near your loved ones, but at the same time, I don't think it's good for society where you have people living in certain clusters and blocks and not interacting with other people. It is why you get incidents where racial tensions are fueled because of this. And then what you have is communities never move forward, because what you have is, because the whole community lives in one block, you get the sense of that.
So I mean, if they prefer to segregate, what is the issue regarding that? I mean, they do have a choice. They can live in certain areas and...
Yeah, it's not necessarily that. It's just when you have people segregated and not interacting, then you don't really learn much about different people, and then you have an us versus them mentality. Whereas if you're interacting with different people on a daily basis, maybe living close to them, you get to learn more about them. Whereas if you're living in a segregated society, you don't have that.
Okay, and I think then you get stereotype as well. Stereotype as well, that you practice certain things and then you get labels in the media as well?
Yeah, well, sometimes, you know, you get Asians or Muslims complaining that they're stereotyped against in the media, but then they never really come out and speak out against it, or they don't interact with other people. So that's why, you know, some people do resort to stereotypes, and often some of the stereotypes can be true, because a lot of the immigrants don't want to integrate into society. They have this notion that when they first came over, they wouldn't settle here permanently. They were going to move back one day, back to their village or their city, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then you have their children who are born and brought up here, who aren't tied to that land as much. So there you have a bit of a
further down into our own culture. When we talk about the stereotyping, I mean, don't you think it's a part of our own culture as well as our sort of set of values as well, that we don't even prefer sitting with the person or a community who is from another region within our own country, or, you know, if it's from a different clan or caste?
You're absolutely right about that. What I've noticed a lot here is that you have maybe Punjabis who look down on people from a certain part of Kashmir, and vice versa. You know, they deem others who are lower on the caste level. And then obviously you have those people dividing themselves on caste, so the castes do discriminate against one another. And this system continues because you have people of the same caste or same family or same village moving to one part of a town in the UK. So that continues, and then sometimes that will filter down to the children eventually.
Let me bring in Imran here. Imran, you tell us about, do you agree with this, that it's part of our own culture as well, that we prefer this sort of segregation and we don't want to be part of the society?
I think, excuse me, it depends, because if we look at our own cultures and religious identities, we are quite diverse. So you have the Barelvi, Shia, Sunni, Maliki. You have lots of different religious entities.
But definitely there is hostility against each other as well.
Yeah, but I think that's where the idea of culture and faith should be actually reconciled, because if you look at religion and Islam, which is the universal faith that all these entities would be following, these groups, it promotes this idea of working in cohesion and together. You know, there's a famous verse in the Quran that says Ummatul Muslimun, which is the Ummah, meaning everybody, regardless of your faith, your background, your ethnicity, or your skin color, we are all universally equal. So I think that universality should be something that should be promoted
Within our own communities. You tell us, Dean, from your own experience, is it everywhere? I mean, for example, Scotland, people from Scotland, they don't like people from England as well. So it's within your own culture, within all societies. So how do you expect that social coexistence and cohesion?
Well, there's a certain comfort zone, isn't there, that's attributed to sort of being with people that you know, agreeing with the things that you agree with, and there's a world outside of that, and there's an old saying that life begins at the end of your comfort zone, and in order for us to all branch out, understand each other, and to grow as a society cohesively, it's necessary for us to sort of work in a culture where we're taking and understanding each other, and we're making the effort to do it, because all of these media sensations are all sort of embedded in ignorance and an ignorant attitude and a shying away. We don't want to understand people. I mean, we talked earlier about the people, understanding the people who were responsible for the 7/7 bombings. Now, the very idea of understanding other people that have such extreme,
as well.
You know, it's no, we're not here to understand them. We're here to live our way and this and that. Now, no one's ever going to condone something like that, but understanding each other and understanding all of our differences is the key to moving forward in the long run, whereas staying insular and within our comfort zones is the key to it's not growth.
Okay, do you agree, Aram? Do you think, I mean, it's a certain media which has been propagating, or is it the negative aspect of it?
I think you can only blame media to a certain extent. I mean, I think Muslims and maybe Asian people do like to blame other people a lot, but some of those problems are already there. They don't look at themselves. They don't realize sometimes they're doing the damage themselves as well. You know, Asian people and Muslim people discriminate against each other on a daily basis. It doesn't take the media to fuel this. I think that's probably part of it, but I think we are the big problems ourselves.
That's
we
what I
do
want to come on,
discriminate against ourselves.
So do you agree that if I say that we live in denial, we don't accept it's a problem?
Yeah, I think to an extent you can say that. I think maybe the younger generation is sort of changing this slightly. I think the views that we were talking about before, but segregation and caste system, I think they're the ways of the elders. I don't think someone of my generation and of my age is really bothered about caste and creed. I think that's just something the older generation were more aware of and more bothered by.
What can be done? I mean, obviously by your generation, for example, that can improve things.
It's difficult to say what the solution is. Sometimes, you know, there isn't really a solution, but I think obviously more education and more inspiration. I think people from my generation do tend to integrate more. We experience things a lot more. We meet people of different cultures, different nationalities, and we tend to be more educated now. You know, someone of my parents' generation, they weren't encouraged to go studying or encouraged to work or meet people, whereas, you know, someone like myself is used to meeting people from different ethnic backgrounds and encouraged to learn, encouraged to study, encouraged to travel, and because of that you get to see more of the world and you get to meet new people and you have a better understanding of other people as well, which is something that was lacking.
In terms of responsibility, not to cut you off here, but in terms of responsibility, I understand it's the responsibility of ourselves as well, but when you are talking about your own experiences, that you meet new people, you learn new languages, new culture, then again, but you've been told by someone else, being a policy making institution or the media, that you have to be more loyal, then how would you react to those when you're making your effort as well?
Sorry?
I said, when you make your effort, but you still get these notions from media, from the policy making institutions, the government bodies, that you still have to do more, how do you react to those then?
I don't think I need to do anymore, to be honest. I know what I do on a daily basis. I think this question of loyalty is a bit strange as well. I mean, I was born and brought up here. I feel British. I'm loyal to this country. I don't know what else I can do, to be honest. I think maybe when they talk about what more can be done, I think maybe they have the older generation in mind who didn't do that, whereas they're missing a trick with the younger generation, not realizing that we're doing a bit more to fit in, and well, we do fit in. I don't see what else I can do, and I don't think it's fair solely to blame the media for this, or the media's telling us we need to do this. Sometimes I think politicians make speeches just for the sake of it because they need to be seen to be doing something.
Let me bring in Imran here. I want to ask you this question, that how much do you think this language barrier plays this role towards social cohesion?
I think language is an important factor. I think, you know, this idea that if an immigrant comes here, they should learn English, for example. I think that is important because, as Iram said, it allows opportunities. It allows you to sort of meet different people. It allows you to look for work opportunities. So I think that is a fundamental basis. So I think, you know, understanding and learning about the British language is important in that respect. Yeah. Okay,
Iram, I want to ask you. I think you must have obviously seen this as well. The recent census. I mean, there are 546,000 people who speak Polish in UK. So, I mean, they're very proud about their languages, aren't they?
Yes, they are. I'm not sure what the question is, to be honest.
No, but my question is that why we shy away from our own language and culture. Sometimes we do extra to prove ourselves that we are British, and you know, we have to have this certificate for being British.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, yeah, Polish people are proud of their language, but you do see some English people complaining when some East European people don't speak English, and to an extent you can see why. It's because you know, you need to have a common language. You need to be able to communicate with people, and when you live in a country you need to be able to speak to people in that language, and here it's English. I think also Urdu though was the third language though, so it's not far behind Polish.
Yes, that's true as well. But I mean, you tell us, Dean, that do you have to speak English to be British, or can you be?
I would say if it was the most widely used language in the, well, it's the language of the country, and it's the business language, that it's beneficial and ideal that anyone who intends to stay in the country does.
Okay, but let me put the question other way around. someone goes and marries someone from Pakistan or India, and they marry to someone who they know, as you know, it happens often in our communities. Now there is a policy of the government now they have introduced the English test system. Does not it violate the very human rights that they have to pass the English test?
I think there's also there's legal factors to be considered as far as sort of being on the electoral register and things like that is concerned. You know, reading English would be an important part of being part of the society.
To the society. Okay, Imran.
I think, well, as Dean said, knowing English is really important, you know, for job opportunities, as I said previously, and to try and sort of make friends and sort of integration, that word we mentioned. But I think when you refer to the citizenship test, that is a different element, because many of the sort of tests that have been adapted by the government have been based on understanding certain question set. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anybody who practices for that test will be somehow more British, but
that refutes the very basic idea of these tests. Then,
but you see, some of that they do the sort of, I think, the ESOL course, which is where you go to a college, you meet friends, you meet different people, you have a teacher there, a lecturer, and the whole idea is it's a holistic approach. You go there for about 6, maybe 12 months, and you're benefiting from different tasks, you're understanding, you're learning how to fill an application form in for a job. You know, these are crucial things, so I think we shouldn't downplay the seriousness of that. But we should be wary that sometimes, you know, the questions on some of these citizenship tests about, you know, the monarch and various other things can be quite misleading.
Okay, Aaron, want to bring in this Islamic or religious point of view now. What is your understanding of Islam? Does it promote inclusion or exclusion? What do you think?
I think it does.
It does.
But I think we need to be a bit careful when discussing religion, because people always quote the Quran or they use religion and they use it when it suits them and they disregard it when it goes against them, and then people find a way to justify what they do. Now, from my understanding, Islam wouldn't have spread if the first Muslims hadn't intermarried. You know, the Prophet himself married women of different tribes and races, but you know, Muslims seem to especially our communities, they seem to disregard that. And according to the 2001 census, people from South Asian background, especially Pakistanis, are less likely to marry outside of their communities, and that's mostly true of the women. They tend to marry someone from their own community, usually of the same caste.
We should work as a community. I think that's the real message of Islam as well. Wherever you go, you have to promote that sort of thing. But does it, you know, then they have this another version that is all lead to clash of civilization as well. So what is your view on that?
No, there's only a clash if you make it a clash. If you're going to, again, like I said before, if you're going to segregate yourself, then yeah, you're going to create that barrier yourself. Whereas if you've integrated into society, if you've met people from different backgrounds, it's not going to be a problem. Also, I don't see why there's going to be a culture clash if you're talking, let's say, in regards to marriage, because if you're both Muslims, then what's the problem? Because if you're both Muslims, you're going to have those certain views in common. And, you know, culture, say, for example, maybe language or maybe food, they're going to be the only differences. Everything else is going to be the same because you're both Muslims, so I don't see what the problem is.
We say it, and I totally agree with you, but, you know, I mean, there's a recent report that 1 in 4 people now believe that following Islam is not compatible with the British way of life.
I think when people say that, what you've got to realize is the majority of the Muslims here are going to be of a certain background. They're going to be either Pakistani or of Kashmiri origin. So I think when people see those communities segregating themselves, they automatically link it to Islam because obviously the majority of them are Muslims as well, and because people identify themselves as Muslims more now, that's why people say, oh, well, this is a Muslim issue. Sometimes it's not. So in a way, you can't really blame non-Muslims for thinking certain things if Muslims themselves don't come out and speak out against it, or don't come out and lend a hand and say, this is what we're about, this is what we do, they don't reach out to them. So where else are they supposed to get this information?
I mean, you mentioned this reaching out thing. So, I mean, we're almost getting closer to our finishing time as well. Just give us your thoughts about, are we better prepared as a community to tackle these issues?
At the moment, I don't really think so, because, to be honest, I think it's a generational thing. The elders aren't really bothered about reaching out because one day they will move back to their villages and retire there, whereas the next generation, I think they're doing something to bridge that gap. They're slowly reaching out, I think, and this generation, we are better educated now. We are more active members of society, and we don't identify as much with our parents' countries as much anymore. So I think it will probably take maybe another generation, but whether we'll completely eradicate this segregation, I can't really say with confidence, but I think the next generation...
What's your take? What do you think? Will it take another generation to understand these problems, or...?
I think, again, we have to be careful when we look at these type of issues because, as I said to you at the beginning, many studies have shown that there is quite a lot of evidence that, in particular, British Muslims feel integrated. And the statistics are saying that, with the 90% Pakistani community as an example, I think it's important to try and understand what we mean by integration because it can act as a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you are promoting and the state would like communities to be integrated, yet on the other hand, it unfortunately can create an element of exclusion by actually creating all these different diversity programs that eventually lead to more segregation on that basis.
Okay, what's your take, Dean? What do you think?
I'd agree with Imran that it's sort of these diversity programs and things like that can have the worry that they may appear to be, oh, you need help to becoming one of us, so therefore, go through this program. I think it's something that can happen organically, and it may happen in the next, as the generations go on. It will filter, and people will grow into each other.
Okay. Final thoughts, Iram. You tell us. I mean, what's your argument for? Do you think social integration is an option, or segregation? We can live as a segregated community.
No, segregation. We've had enough of that. It's not worked. We need to integrate better. I think gone are the days where we could just live in clusters of society, clusters where it's just Pakistanis in one corner, Bangladeshis in another. It creates an us versus them mentality, and I think we need to stop this whole marrying of British-born children to relatives in villages from Pakistan, because then that cycle continues. So no, we need to have better integration. I don't think
great. Okay.
Where
What's your take? I mean, do we have option here, or is must do?
Do you mean by integration?
Yeah, or segregation?
Or segregation. Well, I think, as I said previously, integration is important, but many ethnic minority communities would argue that they feel already integrated into society. I think it's, as I said at the beginning, it is a personal thing. National identity integration is a personal commodity. It's how you view it yourself.
And rather than having to go for certain set, you can always have your own culture and can create a link for that. Okay, well, what's your thoughts, final thoughts?
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. Integration is happening, has happened, and will continue to happen.
Okay. Thank you very much, Iram, for joining us. Imran and Dean. Viewers, we have discussed social cohesion, integration, and segregation issues associated with this. And I want to end by saying that according to a research recently published by Joseph Rowntree, most people feel in UK that social cohesion is about negotiating the right balance in expressing differences and unity in local areas. So rather than expecting complete consensus on values and priorities, it is more about choices. We should be given choices, but in the meantime, our religion and our culture, they should be playing a part as well. Our religion never ever stated this, that we should work against the community. In the last sermon delivered by Prophet Muhammad, no Arab is superior on any other Arab. And these are the things which we have forgotten long time ago. We must remember those, and we must act in the best interest of a society where we live in, and we must promote diversity as well. Thank you very much. Inshallah, we'll join you next time, Saturday. Thank you.